So you manage the Shanghai Tower, your company does. Massive project, and I wonder how asset management is different on that scale than in some of the other projects that are in your portfolios, or is it basically the same thing, just larger?
That's a good question. It's certainly different. Now there are some similar attributes, but it's bigger and grander on every scale. So when you compare, if you look at management or leasing in any traditional building, in most cities you'll have a peer group of buildings that you can compare quite easily. There'll be differences, but essentially the same comparisons. In Shanghai, with Shanghai Tower, you can't do that. It's got a scale which is on global proportions. It's the second tallest building in the world. So for us, we found that globally benchmarking that building, every facet of management, design, from a management perspective, leasing, how you interact with the building, it's essential to draw experiences from London, from New York, from Chicago, from Australia. And that's what we did when we looked at the building, because to manage something with that complexity requires a different skill set and a different group of people.
And what lessons did you draw from those other cities?
The lessons are, I think that the taller the building, the more complex it is. When you get that over a certain threshold, there are elements around the building which require you to think more laterally. I mean, fundamentally, we've got a great partner. We've got a great partner with the Shanghai Tower Corporation who own the building, and aligning with their requirements and their needs and their ethos were essential for the local environment in Singapore. It's different from any other city. But when you look at the occupiers who are going to be occupying the vast majority of the building, and most have now moved in, they're the same occupiers largely as you'll find in those other cities. So they interact with the building in a similar way. So bringing those experiences was certainly beneficial.
What are the main motivators for those occupiers to relocate or to locate into a tall building like the Shanghai Tower? Is it that they want to be in such a high-profile building, or is it the quality of the space, some mix?
It's some mix. We did some research, so our CBRE research over the last couple of years, we did a great paper on super tall buildings and motivations to be in them.
Yeah. And
a couple of you'd think that view and cost would be number one, but they weren't. It was about location, and it was about brand. And then pretty high on the list was actually property management, which was great to hear, that people value how important that is in a space like this. So those were our research findings. There are a number of factors that obviously affect an international or a local occupier. When you go into a building like Shanghai Tower, it has a level of gravity that no one else can compete with. So that's obviously part of it. But it's also something where we found that they're also they're quite attracted by the integrated uses within a building. It's not just an office space, it's a vertical community.
Right.
Like a city really squeezed into one huge building.
How does that motivator breakdown that you just mentioned differ if you're a residential tenant versus a business that wants to relocate to a super tall?
So a residential tenant, how would you mean?
Just someone who's if you have someone who's renting an apartment or buying a condo in a super tall or mega tall building, are they still looking at those same priorities of property management, location, before views and cost, or is the breakdown different?
Well, I think location is always going to be key. Location is a key driver for any such decision. But the occupiers are starting to change now. Occupiers are starting to look at the environment that you work within, flexible space, communities, collisions within buildings. And I think that there's a lot to learn from the residential side that's relevant also for the commercial side. If you look at that work-life balance, the blurring of lines between the two is increasingly significant.
You mentioned that vertical community aspect of Shanghai Tower. How did that play out? How is that different about managing a building like Shanghai Tower than one where you've got maybe more discrete functions by height?
But if you look at the role of the ground floor now, if you are in a 128-story building, it's sometimes, even though the lifts are incredibly fast, and vertical transportation, the technology is getting better and better, and particularly in a building like Shanghai Tower, the reliance on ground floor is lower. So more people are spending time in the buildings and being captured in the buildings. And it's essential for the economic viability of a building for each usage to be supporting other usages. So hotel, it'll be serviced apartments, the F&B, the catering, restaurants, cafes, rather than you go into a building, you go up, you work there, you leave, you go out to a restaurant.
Right.
Capturing in that community is very, very different. It's more symbiotic between the usage and the physical environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking that a lot of office tenants might not even know what else is in the building. If they know they work on the 28th floor and that's it, you could work there years, and maybe you know the cafeteria and your office floor, but what's above you? Oh, I don't know, it's some other company, it's some other law firm or something. But how about when you have these other uses, is the idea to have more cross-pollination? Probably there's still some need for privacy, but how far can we take this idea of a vertical community?
Well, I'll just take that to a different parallel for a second.
Sure.
There's a guy called Tony C. who runs a company called Zappos, huge company in the US.
Yeah.
He ran this great study in Las Vegas where this huge building, huge workforce, and they designed the space all around this environment to create collision spaces. When I say collisions, it's not physical collisions, but the more the greater number of times during a day that individuals in that space will connect with each other from different spaces. Because if you are working in a normal traditional environment, it's quite habitual. You spend time with the same people. But if you collide with different people at the coffee machine, in breakout areas, in the lift, in the corridor, in the pantry, you will start to get different ideas, and you start to pick off different things around the business, and you'll learn more. And the business will intrinsically benefit from that. So if you take that from just one occupier, and you look at that in an entire building, buildings are changing now, creating nodes around some of these key environments where people from different occupiers will they'll gravitate to those spaces, and they'll naturally be designed to collide and meet different people. And that's something which it's hard to put a quantitative number on this, but it will naturally increase retention rates in buildings, because what you're doing is you're going beyond a space. You are creating a community that interlaces with other people. Yeah.
So rent becomes also kind of membership into a club or a community.
Yeah, no, it does, and there's some great examples across the globe at the moment. There's a fabulous client of ours called Dexus in Australia, who have this incredible concept called Dexus Place. Dexus Place it's a membership type of environment. It's not a serviced office. It's a space where any user of Dexus buildings can go into one of these Dexus Place facilities, and they can use all these different facilities they don't necessarily need to have in an office. But traditionally, you would spend money on the projector, the video conference, or the meeting rooms, and that provides a different area. And it's not sterile. It's exciting and it's engaging. That's the type of concept we're starting to see a lot more.
How did you get that community feel in the International Commerce Center project in Hong Kong?
Well, we didn't work specifically on the ICC project. It's self-managed by the owners, but the ICC project is really interesting because what it is, it's a huge building in an area that didn't have any buildings before. So the challenge that they've had there is, how do you capture and support and service all the occupiers in this building, both from the administration staff to the CEO. So you can provide expensive restaurants and high quality, luxurious retail and so on, which are going to service a certain proportion of the occupier. But also there's areas in there where you have to be able to provide different services that capture different people in the building. And I think that's evolved over a period of time, and they've probably learned some lessons there, but they've got a great team.